Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here. Today we're talking about Immortal Dogma, the brand new 120 ability from Sadali that a lot of people have been really hyped for and really talk about very highly. And the fact of the matter is that it's actually a very overrated ability, and I'm here to tell you exactly why. So, Immortal Dogma, to get into this, we need to re-understand exactly how hate functions, because most of the conversations that I see just straight up have the understanding of hate wrong, and until you get this right, you're going to handcuff how good you are with Sadali and get the most benefit out of him. So the hate overview. There's 5 sources of hate. Ignore the typo, I'm sorry. 5 sources of hate. Vision card via Vow of Love. That'll grant you 3 hate. The equipment, the bow tie, will give a character 3 hate. A passive ability, like Dwayne's Swift Shadow ability. That's a passive you can equip. A mastery ability, like Joom's 5 innate hate. That is there all the time, regardless of passives, to start every fight. And then there's hate generated via buffs, like Immortal Dogma from Sadali, Warrior of Light's Brave Presence is another very popular one, and then Taunting Blade that comes with the Spellblade jobs is also another one. Now, the most important thing to know is that these top 4 do have the opportunity to stack. They are completely different sources of hate, so because they're different sources of hate, they will stack together. Buffs, though, do not stack for hate, meaning Brave Presence will not stack with Taunting Blade. Same can be said for Engelbert if he uses the Immortal Conviction in Taunting Blade. Those do not stack because they're 2 abilities, meaning they're the same source. You have to absolutely remember that, and I'm going to show you firsthand exactly what that looks like in game. So currently I have Warrior of Light with the Vow of Love sub-vision card on here, so it brings it down to 2 hate instead of the 3. And I'm going to show you the exact mechanics of how this functions, because you absolutely just have to understand this. We're way too far along in the game now at this point for people to still be misunderstanding how hate works given how important it is. So, when you go into the map initially, you can actually drill into the character, clicking on them in the magnifying glass, and there's a stat line here for hate. You can see Warrior of Light starts with 2, that is from the vision card, that's 1 source of hate. Now, if we give him just a moment here, I'm going to use Brave Presence, and Brave Presence increases his hate by 12. So when he uses that on himself, he will now have 14 hate, 2 from the Vow of Love and 12 from the Brave Presence, and you can see that it's now changed to 14. Now when a character gets attacked, regardless if it's a multi-hit attack, and I'm going to demonstrate this, I'm going to use Elena's Iridescent Blade, which is a quad-hit attack on Warrior of Light. Every time you get hit, it reduces your hate by 2. So if you go into Warrior of Light now, he will have been his hate reduced by from 14 to 12 because Elena attacked him. Now, he already has the Brave Presence buff being applied, and now I'm going to have Warrior of Light use Taunting Blade in just a second here, when it's his turn. Oh my goodness. When he goes to use Taunting Blade now, most people would assume he gets more hate from that, when the fact of the matter is he does not. He was at 12 hate, and he remains at 12 hate. The 2 different buffs of hate do not stack. Now, on one further point, 2 of the same hate buffs do stack. It's the same buff that works, and I'll show you here. Now, Warrior of Light's AI would never do this, so this is really more for manual PvE or manual PvP, but if he reapplies Brave Presence, it will add another 12 hate because it's the same buff that was initially applied, and you'll see he's now at 24 hate. We're going to see exactly how this works with Immortal Dogma now. So why this doesn't matter for win. Now if you're running Sadali, you are very likely running him with Joom, 80 to 90% of situations. So Joom starts with 5 hate, as we talked about with her mastery ability. Let's assume Sadali is faster, just so we can move first. And he casts Immortal Dogma on her. That's his first priority ability. It gives her Reraise and the 6 hate. So Joom is now at 11 hate, 5 from one source, 6 from another. Now Joom's AI is prioritized. I'm sorry, I'm taking a step back. The reason why he does that, all buffs in this game will be applied to characters that are A, in range, but B, also have the most hate at that moment. Since Joom has the most hate on the team at 5, Sadali's AI will prioritize casting this buff on her. That's important to understand. So Joom's AI is programmed turn 1 to use the Vacuum Veil, which generates 12 hate. What's going to happen after that is she'll now have 17, 5 from her mastery, and 12 from Vacuum Veil, because Vacuum Veil is higher. It does not stack with the 6 given from Immortal Dogma. Now, regardless of Immortal Dogma, enemies will have already and continue to move toward June because she has the innate 5 hate to start. It's the highest on your team. So the net effect, June gets re-raised, that's cool, but the hate that Immortal Dogma gives is absolutely irrelevant. Now, the reason why this is important to keep in mind, and why re-raise is quote-unquote not good, now obviously re-raise is good, but this ability is really not his strong point. On most maps, you are going to, on average, get 2 buffs off. Relying on any more than that is either very map specific or very randomly matchup specific. Now, with that being our baseline, if you were to examine the 3 different buffs that Sadali can cast, Immortal Dogma is the highest priority, Sermon of Power is the second, and Divine Sacrament is the third. In terms of overall game balance and battle changing abilities, Sermon of Power and Divine Sacrament are 10 times, 100 times more impactful than giving June re-raise. Sermon of Power, again, is a giant A attack and magic buff. It's also increased AoE resistance of 20 for himself and all allies. Divine Sacrament is all elemental resistance by 20% and also grants the following effect for Dispelling Auto Restore and Dispelling the Follow-Up cast, and increases his spear penetration by 50. These 2 buffs, by giving your teammates 2 different sources of non-penetratable resistances, are so much more impactful than giving June re-raise. Speaking frankly, the resistances that he gives her from these 2 buffs are so good, she has a far decreased chance of dying in the first place because of how good they are. So when it comes to auto PvP, that's one of the main reasons why this ability is very much overrated by how we're talking about it in the community. Now you ask yourself, where is this ability good then? Because it is a good ability, it's just not as comparatively good for the majority of content that we're going to be applying it to. So it's really good in PvE content where you need to control enemies. So the ability for you to manually pick the character and the timing of applying that hate to control the enemy AI is very valuable. So things like Trials of Reckoning and Tower and who knows what else you want to apply to, this is very good. The second good place for it is in rainbow comps where tanks don't have innate hate. For instance, Engelbert. If you were to have Sadali move first and give Engelbert 6 hate, and now you're able to control the enemy movement because of that, where Engelbert is normally much slower and it takes him a much longer time to cast Immortal Conviction, that actually might have some upside then, where, sure, not only do you give Engelbert the re-raise and he also gets the hate and the Immortal Courage, sure, that's probably another good scenario. But any other tanks that have innate hate, this really isn't going to matter. Another scenario would be in comps where there are no tanks, but you at least want to give aggro or hate somewhere. That's a MMORPG term, I'm sorry. So if you're running Sadali with Tifa and 2B and you want one of them to be kind of your pseudo tank, then sure, this might be a good opportunity, but that is in most instances objectively not as good as using June. She's just that good overall. But then finally, there's the very niche scenario where the other third character in your comp, like a DPS I would assume, has both Bowtie and Vow of Love, because those do stack. Remember, they're 2 different sources of hate. So if you add Vow of Love on the subvision card and Bowtie gives you 3 hate, that'll be 5 hate total, and you add that DPS in slot 1. The way AI works, that character will have 5 hate, and June will also have 5 hate, but technically because that DPS is in slot 1, the AI will prioritize the buff on that given equal hate. Sadali will use Dogma on them instead due to the slot 1 priority. In which case, after June uses Vacuum Veil, June will have 17 hate, your other DPS will now have 11 hate, 5 from Bowtie and Vow of Love, and 6 from Immortal Dogma, and now theoretically you have like 2 pseudo-tanks. And again, there's upside good and bad for this. Number one, it sure may take some of the heat off June, that after she receives 3 to 4 attacks, the enemies will switch to targeting your other DPS instead, so June will have some of the heat taken off of her. But conversely, that also means June won't tank as long, which could also be a bad thing. So that's why I say very niche scenario. So overall, not a bad ability, but very much misunderstood in other content creator videos I've seen, other subreddit threads I've seen, Discord conversations. It's a good ability, but not nearly to the degree that I think most people are thinking in terms of the impact that it's going to have. I just needed to shine some light on that. Hopefully that makes sense the way I talked about it. But that's it for now. For those of you that are building Sadali, go to town, have fun playing around with it, see where it works, where it doesn't. Obviously, there are varying levels of competition across all the different ladders of Guild Wars, so in some ranks and guild ranks you might get away with it, but in others you're going to be punished more severely for not. But that's it for now. Hopefully this is insightful, and I'll talk to y'all soon.